Greetings and salutations, gamers. My name is Kyle, also known as GamersWeekend, and welcome back to the Elden Ring challenge. Last time, we kicked things off with archery only, a rather simple challenge that was actually quite fun to take on. But today, we're turning up the heat while visiting one of the most classic challenges in the series, Level 1. Level 1 challenges are very common and are often the first challenge people will tackle in a Souls game. RL1, or Rune Level 1, is a great tool for learning the game and is a surprisingly flexible challenge, but we'll get to that in a bit. First, let's go over the rules. Since this is a classic challenge, and I imagine a lot of you will be curious to try this out yourselves, if you haven't already, I decided to keep the rules fairly simple. For this challenge, we have to start with the Wretch class, the only class that starts at Rune Level 1. Of course, by Rune Level 1, we mean the overall level of the character. At no point in the run are we allowed to spend our runes to level up the character. We're mostly looking to just beat the game, but we'll be going after all those remembrances while we're at it. And finally, no major glitches or sequence breaks are allowed. In case you guys are curious about specific segments or want to watch the full fights, we stream this entire playthrough right here on YouTube. Playlist for the full VODs will have a link in the description below. Oh yeah, and
press the subscribe button.
That should be about it. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, and without further ado, this is the Elden Ring Rune Level 1 challenge. We start the run by picking the Wretch class, the only level 1 class in Elden Ring, and then made the mistake of letting chat name the character. Somehow, we ended up on Robbie Maidenliz. Not Maidenless, Maidenliz. Character limits coming to bite us in the back. Chat also threatened to riot if the character wasn't green, so this is the monstrosity you'll have to look at for a while. After sacrificing ourselves to the Thousand Hand Thumper, we made our way down Waifu Lane, getting ourselves a new Honda, an overhyped Invertebrate, and a Death Bell. Afterwards, we head to the Third Church of Marika to grab a Physic and a Sacred Tear, and then to the Prank Chest where we get teleported to the Caelid Mines where Challenger Andy demanded that we parried the rats. Melina takes us to Round Table Hold, which kinda looks like a dentist's office now that I'm looking at it, and then we head through Celia to grab a Sacred Tear at the Plague Church before making our way to Fort Faroth. Not only is the first elevator medallion there, but so is the Radahn Soar Seal, a very powerful item for RL1. While wearing the talisman, health, endurance, strength, and dexterity are all boosted by 5. While the health and endurance aren't going to be super helpful, the strength and dexterity are going to drastically increase our weapon options. With some boosted stats, we can make our way to the Death Touch Catacombs to grab ourselves an Uji Katana. This thing's a pretty good weapon and is going to carry us for quite a while, but first, we need to get it some considerable upgrades. First, we can head to the Limgrave Tunnels to grab most of the smithing stone ones we need, and then pick off the Stone Digger Troll for the runes. Those upgrades aren't going to be free. Next stop is to head south into the Weeping Peninsula to grab ourselves the 3 Sacred Tears, and then afterwards into the... Siofra? Space Mountain. Space Mountain to grab a Golden Seed and some Smithing Stone 2s. After pumping a few upgrades into the Uchi Katana, we go ahead and purchase ourselves a dagger from Round Table Hold. After teleporting back to Limgrave, we head to the Storm Hill and take out a Cavalry Knight to grab the Golden Vow Ash of War. Golden Vow is a fairly strong buff that buffs our attack power by roughly 11%. The nice part is that we can slap this on our dagger, which has super low requirements and low weight, and still get the full effects of the buff. Next up is to head around Stormvale Castle and into Liurnia to grab ourselves some more Smithing Stone 2s from the gazebos before making our way into the Academy. In the Academy Graveyard, we can drop down to the lower segments to grab the entire Carrion Knight set. Defenses this run are a tricky topic, but early on in the game we have the ability to survive a lot of attacks, so having armor is worth it, especially if it's light enough. Speaking of which, time to take on Margit. We can use our Golden Vow dagger buff with our +5 Uchi Katana to deal pretty great damage, and the extra bleed procs are a big help. We also aren't in very big danger of getting one-shot here, so even with taking a couple hits, it's pretty smooth sailing. Margit goes down on the first try. Margit was an important step to take out early since he gives us our first talisman pouch. That's going to dramatically increase our options. I'm going to head to the Purified Runes in Liurnia and grab the 2 Fingers talisman from the boarded up dungeon. This talisman will grant us 5 levels to our faith while we're wearing it. That's going to be enough levels to give us the ability to cast Flame Grant Me Strength, which buffs our damage by another 20%. The fun part is that both Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow will stack on top of each other for a massive boost to our damage. Buffs in hand, my next target is Clifford the Wizard. His attacks won't one-shot us, but he does attack quickly, which is fairly dangerous. Also, not gonna lie, was playing pretty badly in that fight. Takes a few tries, but eventually we put Old Speller down. The big reason I'm wanting to get into the second part of the academy is to grab the Glintstone Wet Blade, which allows us to infuse cold into our weapons without needing a cold-based weapon art. I go ahead and grab Unsheath from the Scarab in Southern Agio Lake, because I really like it, and then use it to apply cold to our Uchi Katana. At plus 5, this now makes it cause 73 frost buildup as well as 38 bleed buildup per strike. The frostbite will cause a damage chunk as well as increase the damage taken to the target. Bleed will cause more damage chunks on top of that, and then add in our stacking damage buffs. I think we're pretty set to clean up the rest of the early game. After talking to Nefeli to set up our meetup in Round Table Hold for the Arsenal Charm, we go ahead and take on Mr. Niall. Once again, we're not in too much danger of dying, except for when we play like an idiot. We do more than enough damage to take him out. Godrick goes down. Before we head back into Raya Lucaria, we make a stop by the Crystal Tunnel to kill the Crystallian for the Bell Bearing. This will let us buy Smithing 2s, and with some of the Smithing 3s we've found, we can upgrade to a plus 6 Uchi Katana. We also don't forget to upgrade our Wolf Ashes, as well as grabbing the Arsenal Charm in case we need it later. If I wanted to make my life easier, I always could have headed to Altus here to grab the Bell Bearing for 3s and 4s to get it to plus 12, but I think we did just fine without it for now. Full Moon Mom is up next. First phase was pretty easy to take care of. As long as you're fast at stopping the song, there's no real danger. Phase 2 was a bit more sweaty, but lone wolves are a big help on this phase because of how easy she staggers. The sweeping attack from Unsheath is also really good for clearing out the wolves she summons quickly. The fight gets a bit tense, but Renalla goes down yet again on the first try. Chad also demanded Robbie Maidenliz be turned blue here for some reason. Don't ask me why. I truthfully don't know. After grabbing the second Dectus Medallion, we head to Altus Plateau to visit the Sealed Tunnel. Here, we can grab Smithing Stone Bell Bearing 2. This lets us get up to a plus 13 on the Uchi Katana. We take it for a test run against Ancestor Spirit, and the damage is feeling pretty good. Speaking of damage, we're going to head to Tombsward Catacombs next to take out the Cemetery Shade for Lutel's Ashes. We can't quite use her summon yet, but she'll be useful soon. Now if I was smart, I would have gone and got the Opaline Bubble Tier from Weeping Peninsula now. Probably would have saved me a lot of pain. Speaking of which, next stop is Volcano Manor. First thing on the list of things to do here is to take out the Ulcerated Tree Spear at the Minor Erdtree. Now we're entering territory of one-shots being more common than not, and Ulcerated Tree Spirit seemed more than happy to properly welcome us to RL1. With enough time and patience though, we eventually take down the Tree Spirit and get our hands on the Cerulean Hidden Tier. This grants us effectively unlimited FP not only for buffs, but also grants us the ability to summon any FP-based ashes in the game while the tier is active. Cerulean Tier in hand, time to head for the first truly big obstacle in the run, Godskin Fatty Flaps. I definitely came into this one underprepared. At the time, I tried to brute force it with buffs and Lutel. What I should have done was get my hands on the bubble tier for my second physics slot, as well as crafted some sleep pots. If you decide to do this challenge at home, get the sleep pots and the bubble tier. It'll make your fight a lot easier. Although nothing would have helped us from Noble randomly transitioning into attacks mid-roll and then back into roll. It takes more time than I'm proud of, but eventually, we slay the Noble. Taking down Mr. Chunks gets us access to Rykard, and at the time I was possibly considering using the Serpent Hunter as a weapon for a while. Before we consider using it anywhere else though, maybe we should take out the Lord of Scalies first. We go ahead and upgrade our spear up to plus 9 before taking him on. The good news is the damage is great. The bad news is his damage is also pretty great. We shouldn't expect to survive getting hit by him even once. Once again, having Bubble Tier would have been a nice little safety net, but we weren't as sorely in need for it this time as we were before. It takes a few tries, but eventually we beat the blasphemy. Testing out the Serpent Hunter outside of Rykard, it's definitely good, but I'm not sure I'm really feeling it. We get the most damage out of charged heavy attacks, and I'm not exactly sure I've got the timings down well enough to really take advantage of the damage. This is an option we'll keep in our back pocket, but I don't think we'll end up using this one again. I think we're going to have an easier time if we keep our focus on the Uchi Katana for now. It's going to take some extra time to gather the upgrade materials, but I think it's going to be worth it in the end. Getting smithing 5s isn't going to be too bad. Altus Tunnel has some smithing 5s we can get our hands on, and then the rest will be back in the Celia Crystal Tunnel. While we're here, we can go ahead and take out the Falling Star Beast, who drops both a Somber 6 as well as 5 Smithing Stone 7s, which we'll need for our Uchi Katana in a bit. Under the Ariza tomb by the Draconic Tree Sentinel, we can have a Rune Bear break another statue for some Smithing Stone 6s, another Smithing 6 in upstairs Volcano Manor, and another 4 from bodies throughout the rest of Mount Gelmir. The last ones we need are going to be dropped from the Falling Star Beast just outside of the outer wall of Lane-Dell, who we definitely beat on our first try. Good thing too, would be a shame if we spent an hour here because somebody hasn't figured out how to go grab the bubble tier yet. Gotta hate myself sometimes. The Falling Star Beast drops another 5 Smithing Stone 6s, the last ones we'll need for a plus 18 weapon. Finally, the giant head near Fort Faroth has 1 Smithing Stone 8 and 2 Smithing Stone 7s. Put all together, we can cash in our stones for a plus 20 Uchi Katana, which is now at 97 frost buildup on each strike. Let's put this thing to the test. General Radahn isn't a super intimidating boss, but his hitboxes cover a very large area and hit fairly hard. Definitely not a great combination for our tiny health bar. That being said, Okina attacks with the Rivers of Blood Katana, a weapon that deals fire damage. The fire damage will reset the frostbite every time that we complete the buildup, meaning we can get the large chunks of damage multiple times in succession. Even if Okina doesn't hit him, we still get the extra damage from the frostbite.
You know, I should actually go get the bubble tier.
Oh really? We haven't noticed yet. Radahn takes a few tries, but doesn't give us too much trouble. The Star Scourge goes down. At this point, I decided to quickly look into the Mimic tier. The main difference between Mimic tier and other ashes is it uses health to activate rather than focus. The problem is, even with Radagon's Source Seal, we don't have nearly enough health to actually summon it. We took some time to quickly hypothesize how much extra health boost it would take to actually summon Mimic tier, and it's not looking great. I have no doubt that it's possible to summon the Mimic tier, but it would take a considerable amount of resources to do so when we can have much better options with far less effort. It's not really worth the time in this run. Oh hey, we finally picked up that bubble tier. We're only 9 bosses late, but hey, we got it. Last thing before we ascend the capital is the Marika's Source Seal. This is another talisman that'll give us a wide variety of stat boosts. This time, it's a +3 to Mind, Intelligence, Faith, and Arcane. This is another item that'll contribute to our late game build. It's about time we see how the capital goes. First up on the list is the Draconic Tree Sentinel. Our damage is actually fairly good, especially with proccing both Bleed and Frostbite. Only takes a few tries before the Draconic Tree Sentinel goes down. Now that we're in the capital, I need to make a quick pit stop at the subterranean shunning grounds. There's a set of catacombs inside the Loster Pit where we can find Edboy, Priest of Blood. Killing him will give us the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, a talisman that'll boost our attack power whenever we proc Bleed by a substantial amount. Next boss on the list is Piss Ghost Godfrey. I know this boss fairly well, so I was confident going into him. But our first attempt we did almost completely hitless without an Ash. Technically he tagged our shield once around the beginning of the fight, but I'm pretty proud of how this fight turned out. Morgott is next up on the list. First try and a bit of greed got me killed early on, but second try I had my head in the game. Some of his moves can be tricky to dodge, but we managed to avoid most of his attacks. As always, Morgott was a fun, fast-paced duel that we won on our second try. The Land of Giants is now open to us, but before we go there, we have one more item to collect for our final build. First step is to take on Commander O'Neill and Caelid. O'Neill himself isn't too dangerous aside from his Scarlet Rot, and as long as we be careful about slowly picking off the soldiers, then we shouldn't have too many issues. This will let us progress my favorite NPC's questline, Millicent. We're going to go ahead and progress her quest all the way to the Windmill Village where we need to defeat a Godskin Apostle. This boss definitely has the potential to kill us fairly rapidly, but not all of his attacks are one-shots and most of them are fairly easy to avoid. Top that off with our build already doing pretty good damage, and he isn't much of an issue. At this point, we need to, Millicent's prosthesis not only acts like a better winged sword insignia, actively powering up our damage as we land successive hits, but also boosts our dexterity by another 5 levels. With all the pieces required to use our build at a base level, we can now head to the mountaintops of the Giants to face off against Bloody Finger Okina for his weapon. It may have taken a couple of tries, but eventually, we finally claimed the Rivers of Blood Katana. A weapon that is infamous enough that I'm almost entirely sure that you know what it does already. But, just in case you're unaware, the Rivers of Blood Katana deals physical and fire damage, but its main attraction is its massive amount of bleed buildup, especially on its weapon art, the Corpse Piler. We won't be able to entirely rely on this weapon for the run, but it's going to be our main go-to for several bosses. In order to use it, the Silver Tear Mask and Marika's Scar Seal will provide the Arcane. Radagon's Sword Seal and Millicent's Prosthesis will provide the dexterity we need, as well as the Winged Sword effect. Additionally, we can use the Lord of Blood's Exaltation to boost the amount of damage we output with every bleed proc. The only downside is we don't have quite enough faith right now to cast the Flame Grant Me Strength, which would definitely make this even stronger. The build isn't 100% complete yet, but it's already putting out massive damage. We're about ready to take on most of the game at this point. We go ahead and take the Rivers of Blood to +9 and head to Castle Saul.
Oh god, the bird!
Commander Niall's soldiers are the biggest threat in his fight. We can run up and get some opening damage on them as the fight begins, but won't be able to finish them. Managing these soldiers are going to be the most difficult part of the fight. Once the soldiers are down, it turns into one of my favorite battles as we do the dance with Niall. We can also take advantage of his supercharge with Corpse Piler for some big damage. It takes a few tries, but eventually the commander goes down. Before making use of the Haligtree Medallion and fighting Haligtree Loretta, we go ahead and clean up Carrion Manor Loretta first. Not a super interesting fight. We're pretty strong for the area, and Loretta is a boss that has a hard time one-shotting us. Not much to see here. On our way to the Haligtree, we have to get through the Ordina Candle puzzle. The Black Knife armor certainly helps, although we have to make a bunch of death runs to candles, since getting hit by more than one arrow in a 3-arrow burst will instantly kill us. Makes the process a tad annoying, but nothing patience won't get us through after a few tries. Haligtree Loretta isn't much different from Carrion Loretta in concept, but now the damage she deals is much higher. Getting hit from here on out throughout the run probably means death. At the moment, our Ash summons are also extremely outdated. Utel is a decent tank overall, but being only at +2 is certainly not going to get us anywhere. We'll have to fix that soon. Either way, bleed procs do pretty great damage and we have some good openings for Corpse Pilers. Loretta gives us a bit of trouble, but doesn't hold us up for too long. Running around Elfale with level 1 amounts of health is definitely an experience, but here we can sneak about to grab an Ancient Somber Stone for the final upgrade to Rivers of Blood, as well as the Marika's Sword Seal to get our faith back for Flame Grant Me Strength. We go ahead and progress all the way through Elfale, all the way to Malenia, and give it a few runs just to see how it goes. With our current setup, we could definitely take her out now, but I think we can increase the setup even more to make this fight a lot easier. The biggest difficulty in this fight is essentially taking a hit means death, and if you haven't noticed, Malenia attacks a lot. Although I really spent the time to learn her moveset early on because 1, she's probably my favorite FromSoft boss fight, and 2, I knew the challenge runs were coming. So I'm confident that when we come back to this, we'll get it fairly quickly. There's a couple more early game bosses on our list I want to cross off, and in the process we can get some upgrades to our Calling Bell Ashes. First thing to do is to progress Ranni's quest until we can reach the Lake of Rot, and then ride the Forever Box down to Astel. We're pretty strong for this point, but Astel is pretty notorious for hitting pretty hard and with large shockwaves that are tricky to avoid. Not a great combination for RL1. That being said, we thankfully didn't see any of the shockwaves that pose real danger to us, and the rest of the attacks aren't super tricky to avoid. The Nightmare Fuel falls. Not only is Astel on our All Remembrances list, but this also gives us access to the Moonlight Altar area, where we can find the Ringleader's Everjail. Here, we can face off against a much trickier boss, Alecto. Alecto is fast, attacks a lot, and even his basic attacks hit extremely hard, let alone the multi-hit attack that they borrow from Malekith. They have a couple opportunities for us to get some hits in, most notably when they jump in the air and plunge downwards, which leaves them open to a backstab and a follow-up corpse piler. When they drag their dagger along the ground, it can also lead to some openings, depending on spacing and things like that. It takes a bit of practice, but eventually, we slay the Ringleader and claim the ashes for Black Knife Tiche. We go ahead and spend some time upgrading Tiche, somewhere along the line having a tragic run-in with a Dragonkin soldier involving a lot of bleed procs, and then take Tiche to take out the Gargoyles.
Alright, here we go, boys. I present to you plus 10 Black Knife Tiche. She's gonna Tiche a lesson. Tiche? Tiche? Tiche!
So Tiche is pretty great in a couple of ways. She's got a decent amount of HP and is a very fast summon, making her good at avoiding damage as well. Not only that, but she has the ability to use the Black Flames to inflict Destined Death. Destined Death is an effect that causes the target's max health to be temporarily reduced, and Black Flames are a hard-hitting damage over time effect that hits for quite a bit of damage. All these things combined are going to make for one powerful summon, one that we'll use for the rest of the run. What's not great is the Vulgar Gargoyles fight, which is a pretty miserable experience for RL1. They attack very wide areas, their poison gas for some reason deals tick damage in a massive range that will randomly kill you, and they're immune to every status effect in the game. By far one of my least favorite fights in the game, and an even more annoying experience in RL1. This is the last fight I want to spend time on, but it takes us about an hour before we finally slay the Gargoyles. Now that we've made our way into Deeproot Depths, we can quickly finish off Fia's champions with our best friend Tiche, and then visit Vertigo Towers to pick up an important item .png so we can face off against the Lich Dragon. Fortissax isn't too big of a threat. Make sure you don't stand in the clouds of Deathblight like an idiot, and play it safe when dodging his attacks and you're under no real danger. Fortissax in my experience is also notoriously squishy, but maybe that's just because I always come back here so late. Either way, my favorite dragon goes down. Speaking of bosses I love, we should quickly backtrack to take out Bambi Plus. We're pretty over-leveled. Okay, maybe not over-leveled, but you get the point. It's about time we begin to head towards the Fire Giant in Farum Azula, but there's a few things I want to grab on my way there. First thing is to grab ourselves a bow, so I'm going to go ahead and grab the Black Bow. It's an easy grab from Leyndell, has the barrage weapon art, and decent damage. We mostly want the bow for a safe way to apply status effects, although pots would also suffice. In this case, we're going to grab the recipe for sleep arrows from the secret Raya Lucaria merchant in preparation for the Godskin duo. For later bosses in this run, I have a different idea. I was getting some ideas from some of my streamer friends throughout this run, and while I was watching my friend Don't Rage Quit, she definitely gave me some fun ideas. In her run, a lot of her strategies revolved around the Flame of the Redmanes, a weapon art that creates a large arcing flame that deals massive poise damage. I know that Malekith has particularly low poise, and this would be a fantastic strategy to fall back on against other bosses if I'm gonna need it. So a quick thank you to Rach before making my way to Caelid in order to grab the Flame of the Redmanes off an invisible beetle by Fort Gale. We'll go ahead and attach this to our club for now, although if you're planning on trying this out for yourself, then I highly recommend attaching this to a Misery Cord from Stormveil and upgrading it as much as possible. Time to make our way to Fire Giant. This was definitely a fight I was a bit nervous about. His attacks once again cover massive areas and hit like a truck. I don't foresee us being able to survive getting hit without our Physic Bubble on. That being said, Phase 1 isn't too tricky since the leg is fairly easy to target. The second phase, on the other hand, is a much bigger beast. We go ahead and save Tiche for the beginning of the second phase and did our best to target his back. And in classic livestream challenge fashion, this happened.
There is.
Second try, I guess. Now that we've arrived to the Midwest, it's time to take out the Godskin duo.
I'm not gonna lie, this new Outlast game looks kind of weird.
This fight wasn't super tricky. Sleep one Godskin, double team the other, then burst the first one down before the third one respawns. Then just burst them down as they respawn. In concept, super simple. In execution,
Damage there. Little too aggressive there.
I don't want to talk about it. Then came the boss I was super concerned about, Malekith. The Beast Clergyman part is already tricky with its constant barrage of attacks and extremely high damage, but then after just a bit of damage later, it evolves into the flipping and attack spamming nightmare that is Malekith. This was definitely one of the two most tricky battles in the run for me to figure out. Malekith is constantly attacking, and even landing a hit on the guy at times feels like it's up to RNG. That's not even considering the fact that Malekith, the source of destined death, absolutely shreds calling bell summons. If possible, we want to get through the first phase as safely as possible. I think I have an idea on how to make that happen. Thankfully, we have enough arcane and faith in our setup to use the Rotten Breath incantation from the Dragon Communion Church in Caelid. Between the Scarlet Rot and Tiche, we should get a fairly safe Beast Clergyman, but Phase 2 is when it gets tense. 2 Flame of the Redmane hits will stagger Malekith, and by the time he recovers you can do the same thing again, effectively keeping him stun-locked for a short period of time. It's easier said than done though, as getting 2 flames off with how much he jumps around is a very tricky ordeal. It takes numerous attempts, but eventually we get the attempt we were looking for. The Black Blade falls. As the Rune of Death is unbound, Leyndell becomes the Ashen capital. Let's go ahead and quickly take out the first boss. Gideon is a boss that, given the chance, could probably destroy us very quickly. Emphasis on that given the chance part, because, we don't. With Gideon down, let's take inventory of what we've got left. Godfrey and Radahn are the last 2 in the way before we've beaten the game, but we've got a trio of super bosses waiting for us if we want all remembrances. Malenia, Mohg, and Placidusax all await us, and all of them are going to be tricky in one way or another. 5 bosses left on the list, and all of them are probably going to give us some form of trouble. But with a little thought and practice, I think we've got this. Let's kick things off with Malenia. Realistically, the only real problem we're going to have with this boss is Waterfowl Dance. If we're far enough away, then it won't pose too many issues, but if it's in our face, then that's going to be a big issue. Thankfully, if you're able to apply a status effect like Bleed or Frost, it'll interrupt the attack. We go ahead and grab the Freezing Pot recipe from Carrion Manor and stock up on the buds for the fight. Because of the fact that our Rivers of Blood deals fire damage, it'll reset the Frostbite between every pot, so we're not going to have to wait for the Frostbite to time out. Once we get to Phase 2, it's time to bring out Tiche. The only thing we have to worry about at this point is what I like to call her super kick. Whenever Malenia gets chain staggered in Phase 2, she'll gain a massive amount of poise and retaliate with a kick. As long as we don't get caught by it, we should be good. With Tiche by our side and freezing pots in hand, we dominate the Goddess of Rot's second phase. Malenia goes down. Mohg immediately presents us with a dilemma. In order to survive his Nihil Blood Chant, we're going to need to have the Physic tier active, but that's going to have to replace either our Bubble tier or Physic tier. So which one are we going to give up, Tiche or an extra free hit? I figured that it would be much better to have the raw DPS that Tiche provides and go for a quick hitless fight rather than take my chances with a long encounter. First thing we can do is start the fight with summoning Tiche and inflict Scarlet Rot with Rotten Breath. From there, we try to get him as low as possible before he begins the chant. At that point, we can do our best to treat this like a DPS race. With Tiche's Black Flames, Rotten Breath, and Rivers of Blood, we have a ton of damage. It takes a couple of tries to get the right attempt, but we finally find the run. The Lord of Blood is slain. Only 3 bosses left, and I think Rivers of Blood is beginning to reach the end of its life expectancy. Godfrey can be blood, but it's going to be very tricky finding opportunities for Corpse Piler against Cindy Lou Who. Radahn and Elden Beast are both completely immune to bleed, and Placidusax has incredible resistance to bleed as well as a fair resistance to the fire damage. Looks like at this point Rivers of Blood is getting to enjoy a nice retirement while a new weapon gets the spotlight to finish out the run. Once again, we're revisiting the red main strategy I learned from Don't Rage Quit, but this time we're gonna go all in on it. I grabbed the Misery Cord from Stormveil Castle, upgraded all the way to plus 25, and apply the Flame of the Red Main's weapon art to it. The Misery Cord deals immense critical damage on ripostes and backstabs, and we can further boost that damage with the Dagger Talisman from Volcano Manor. The first boss on this setup to take out is going to be the first Elden Lord, Godfrey. I doubt we're going to have a great chance during Phase 2 in order to drink a physic, so we're just going to have to bring Tiche out right at the start. It takes 3 flames in order to fully stagger Godfrey. First phase, that's not a whole lot to ask for. Phase 2, on the other hand, has Cindy Lou Who offering very tight windows to get your attacks in. It gets close at the end, very close, but we get him nonetheless. The first Lord falls. Two bosses left before the end, and my worst fear comes next. Dragon Lord Placidusax. This boss is an absolute tyrant during RL1. He hits hard, has massive resistances, massive hitboxes, and is a massive pain to avoid. His lightning claws cover massive areas, his fire breath is an absolute menace, and the beam attacks at the end of the fight are an absolute pain to deal with. This boss is every RL1's worst nightmare. Misery Cord with Red Mains is actually putting in pretty good work, and the damage on our riposte certainly isn't bad, but this fight lasts for a pretty long time, and he's always throwing out attacks that can end the fight immediately. It feels like our strategy was doing pretty good, but something was missing. We just needed that extra little something to get us a win after so many close attempts. And just when we needed him most, our hero appeared.
Combine Flame of the Red Mane with Black Flame Tornado. Okay. You know what? If this works, the final video is getting a big subscribe to press continue on it sign.
I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by a multitude of creators and challenge runners that love to hang out and support my runs, and this time, Press Continue had the upgrade that we were looking for. When we defeated the Godskin duo, they dropped the Black Flame Tornado weapon art. This one applied to a twin blade can be charged to create a massive flame tornado that hits multiple times with a damage over time effect that drains a percentage of the target's max health. Press's strat is to use the Flame of the Red Mains to stagger the target, but while the target is down instead of riposting, we channel the Black Flame weapon art. I figured it's worth a try. Turns out, the Black Flame Tornado absolutely slams this boss's health bar. The weapon art easily in a full cast dealt over 5,000 damage, and was super reliable as a strategy as well. With this strat, it only took 2 tries before it ended in the only way that it ever possibly could.
Does it count? Come on. Come on. Yes! Ha-ha! Victory is ours!
Well, a promise is a promise. The final boss on our list is up, Radahn. He attacks a lot and quickly, 2 things that we're not very big fans of. He's also able to deflect our Flames of the Red Mains with his parry and recovers far too quickly from being staggered for us to use the Black Flame Tornado. That being said, it doesn't take too many Red Mains to actually stagger him, and most of his attacks can be interrupted. Not to mention that he's weakest to fire damage and won't parry if he's focused on Tiche. As for the Elden Beast, it takes the same amount of Red Mains to stagger as the Dragon Lord, and just like Flat Saxophone, he takes an absolutely immense amount of damage from Black Flame Tornado. In almost no time at all, the Elden Beast is slain. And with that, we can summon the Lunar Princess and finally finish things off.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is Elden Ring at only Rune Level 1.
That was certainly a run. It's not too often that I'm allowed to take on a challenge that's so flexible, and when I first looked into this run with some of my mods, we were absolutely blown away by just how many options there are in the challenge. That being said, this run definitely felt like it was more than just a challenge. It felt more like it was training, like a run to get me ready for the real challenges that lie ahead. If you're trying to figure out at home what challenge run is a good place to start for Elden Ring, I can definitely recommend this one. It'll be a challenge, but I believe with some practice and a little bit of adaptation, you'll all be able to get through it. Once again, I'd like to thank the members of my mod team that helped me put together some of the research for this run, and once again, huge thanks to Don't Rage Quit and Press Continue with their help with the playthrough. And finally, thank all of you for giving me the time to share this run with you. It means a lot to me that I get to spend my time sharing my runs with all of you. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much for watching. But now, I think it's finally time for the real challenges to begin. Next time, we're taking on Elden Ring without consuming stamina. It's an absolute banger of a run, and one that you're definitely not going to want to miss. In the meantime, if you have any challenge suggestions you'd like to see, be sure to let me know in the comments below or in the suggestions channel of our Discord. I always look forward to seeing what you guys can come up with. If you guys did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up, bop that subscribe button, and ring-a-ting-ling that little bell to be notified whenever I drop another video. You can also join the Discord, link is in the description below as always. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you gamers on the flip side. Later!